In this video, we are going to be talking about the discussion section, specifically of our paper, and in general, some comments on APA sections and writing. So what is a discussion section? So the discussion section in most papers is going to follow the results. And the discussion section is really the way that you are then able to provide interpretation for your findings. So remember that the results section just involves reporting on what you found. You're not actually interpreting it. You're not stating commentary. You're not saying, oh, this is in agreement with previous literature. No. You save all that for the discussion section. As the name implies, you're discussing what you have found. You're discussing what you're talking about. So the point of the discussion section is to re-emphasize your findings and ultimately to connect your findings to the existing literature. So for instance, you found X, Y, and Z in your study. You found significant differences between these groups. You found significant correlations, etc. Have others in the literature, have other researchers found similar findings? Have others found opposite findings? And the discussion section really does allow you to kind of start commenting on, well, why might that be? So you're essentially providing commentary to what you found and where you think it's going. So usually, and again, there's no true, way of writing a discussion section that's going to match with every single paper, but usually a discussion section starts with a summary of the key findings. So your readers have just gotten through the results section. The very first paragraph of the discussion section tends to be just a quick summary. You're not providing all the statistical notation. You're just saying, hey, these are the big ideas. These are the big key findings from my paper. And then you are going to start expanding on. Then we want to discuss the research results and link your findings to previous research. So these results are consistent with work by Lippi et al. That also found that blank, right? Now, in the discussion section, authors will also typically have a section or paragraph discussing limitations. Now, limitations are obviously going to be present in every paper, right? No paper is perfect. No paper is able to, completely eliminate everything. But one thing to keep in mind is that this isn't the place to just trash your study, saying that, oh, we didn't find significance, and the reason why is because we have so many different issues with this, right? You don't want to trash your own study, especially if you're trying to get it published. But it is a good way of saying that maybe because of certain things, this may be why we're not seeing what we had expected to see, right? So in this section, these should relatively be points that perhaps address why we didn't find significance, or perhaps points that serve as a springboard to another project. Other sections in the discussion section include directions for future research. So a section talking about, well, based on what you found, based on your results, what's the next logical step? Should we replicate this study in another population? Should we try this animal study with a different model, right? What is another kind of study that could be done to further support your findings, right? So for instance, if you wrote a paper full of just animal behavior results, perhaps it would be wise for you to say, future research should investigate the neural mechanisms behind these phenomena, right? Upcoming studies should look at the brain. And one thing that I want to do really quickly is just kind of share with you a paper that my graduate student and I from a few years ago wrote. This is called Lion's Mane Hericium erinaceus exerts anxiolytic effects in the RTG 4510 tau mouse model. Okay, so here we have our introduction. We have our method section where we outline our variables of interest. We have our results. The results are going to be broken down based on which variables we're talking about: animal body weights, wet food consumption, dry food consumption, open field test variables, so on and so forth. And so as we're presenting our results, again, we're focusing on just stating what was found. We're not interpreting anything. Once we provide all of our results, notice that the first paragraph of our discussion section is really a summary. So this study sought to assess the effects of Hericium erinaceus on a tauopathy mouse model. We hypothesized that H. erinaceus would decrease anxiety-like behaviors, increase locomotor activity, decrease deficits in spatial memory, and improve performance in ADL measures. Overall, results indicate that Hericium erinaceus had significant anxiolytic effects and increased locomotor activity in agreement with previous literature. However, H. erinaceus led to no improvements in spatial memory or activities of daily living. So again, you just made your way through all the results, and this discussion just does a really good job at summarizing the key findings. Then we start going into the variables in a little bit more detail. So tau mice given Hericium erinaceus entered the center of the open field test apparatus faster than tau mice on the control diet, signaling decreased anxiety. Notice that I'm not reporting the F values. I'm not reporting the statistical values. I'm, at this point, just kind of summarizing the key part of that test. These results are consistent with studies using wild-type mice and the open field to assess the effects of Hericium erinaceus. Now, this journal specifically required us to do our references in brackets. You will not be doing references in brackets. You will be putting in the actual last name in year, right? So these studies showed that mice consuming Hericium erinaceus spent more time in the center of the open field. So notice that, I'm tying in what I have found to existing literature. And I do that throughout the entire discussion section. In the elevated zero maze, female mice made more head dips and total transitions than male mice. This is consistent with literature that has shown that females are typically more active than males in the EZM and elevated plus maze. Here are my references to back that up. Head dips are typically indicative of risk-taking behavior and decreased anxiety. Overall, mice given Hericium erinaceus spent more time in the open arms. They spent more time in the open arms and made more head dips, right? A recent study indicated that wild-type mice supplemented with Hericium erinaceus spent more time in the open arms. Again, the point of the discussion section is to say what it is that you found and tie it in to what has already been done in the literature. And we do this throughout the entire discussion section for all the particular variables, right? Now, again, we have a limitation section. Again, you don't have to label it limitation section, but usually papers have it. So one limitation was the administration of the wet food. Each cage was given 150 grams to eat ad libitum, which just means at will. Other studies assessing the effects of Hericium erinaceus have administered the mushroom by oral gavage. However, we chose to allow mice to eat ad libitum to eliminate stress and more closely resemble voluntary consumption. Due to this type of administration, we were unable to calculate the exact amount of wet food consumed by each individual mouse. So again, that's a limitation, right? We did give mice this mushroom, but it was hard for us to be able to look at each individual mouse consumption because they're all housed in groups of about 2 to 3, right? Another limitation may be the model itself, right? Again, we're not trashing our study. We're just stating that, hey, in this specific model, the tau mutation in promoter system results in progressive neural tangle pathology, but other people have reported that the phenotype may not be caused solely by expressed tau, right? So while it does express tau, there are others saying that maybe it's not just due to tau. So that is still a limitation. It doesn't take away necessarily from the findings. It's just putting that specific stuff into context. And then usually at the end, again, future directions. So again, future biochemical assessments on the effects of Hericium erinaceus would be informative to help understand the mechanisms by which this mushroom improves behavior. Tang et al. Assessed insulin-degrading enzyme, NGF, gliofibrillary acidic protein, and APP through Western blots. Results showed that this increased IDE levels, which ameliorated plaques. And so again, I'm stating here that other researchers have looked at the brain and they have found these certain things. So future research would be great to incorporate these. And so again, the discussion section is really good at being able to tie these things in. Okay. So for your discussion section, for Psych and Neuro 394, your discussion section is going to be an abbreviated one because the class is relatively abbreviated in the sense that We only have so much time to get through all the statistics and to try to get you to write a full paper. So the discussion section is going to be a relatively shorter one. So your discussion section should be at least 3 paragraphs long. This is an abbreviated discussion section that should incorporate at least 3 additional references. So you should have at least 3 additional references in your discussion section. You are connecting your findings to the existing literature after all. So you need to give me additional literature showing the findings from your study and how they relate to other things. So your discussion section should not only have connection to the literature, but also it should include a paragraph with future directions. So based on what you found and what you did, what would the next step look like? So this is a suggested organization, just based on kind of my ideas of what this abbreviated discussion looks like. The first paragraph should be the summary of your key research findings. The second paragraph should be linking your findings with the existing literature, and then also including some potential limitations. And then your third paragraph, really providing future directions. This is a really nice abbreviated discussion that includes all the typical components that you would normally see in a discussion section. Now let's talk a little bit about other APA concerns and other APA components, like the title page. So a title page should include the title of your paper, your name, the course number and name, instructor name, and the date. So this was from a previous semester, so we're going to strike that out. This is going to be July 23rd, 2025, which I have correctly stated here. That's the date that your assignment is due. Wednesday, July 23rd, 2025. So your paper title should be roughly centered on the page and bolded. Capitalize major words and keep the title focused. It really shouldn't be more than 1 line. Your author names. Double-spaced line between the title and your name. It should also be centered, but your name should not be bolded. Institutional affiliation is Mercer. Course, Psych, or Neuro 394, whichever one you're in. Instructor name, Dr. Stephen Lippy. Professor Stephen Lippy. Dr. Lippy, whichever one of those, as long as professor or doctor's in front. Assignment date. And one of the things to keep in mind is when you are putting together your final paper, you need to make sure that you have headers and page numbers in your APA manuscript. So you must have a running head flushed on the left on the first page, meaning that on that title page, you have running head written out with the title of the paper in caps. You will have a 1 present on the title page, a single 1 in the top right that indicates your page number. And the preceding pages should then have page numbers in the top right as well. So the pages that are coming after that should have your 2, 3, etc. So what this looks like is here. And what I did was, when I taught this class in the fall 2024, I kind of made just like a mock example of what a title page typically looks like. So here we have the title in bold, roughly centered, right? We have the running head and page number here. Notice that the running head is on the left with the title of the paper all in caps. And then we have our page number on the right. Stephen Lippy, PhD, whatever your name is, Mercer University, Psych or Neuro 394, the professor name, and then the date. Now again, for this class, the date will be July 23rd, 2025. Other APA components. After your title page, you have an abstract. The second page of your manuscript should contain this section, the abstract. The word abstract should appear centered at the top of the page. And what an abstract is a brief summary of your study that contains your research topic, your research question, brief information about your methods, results, and conclusions. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that your abstract should typically not be more than about 250 words. The abstract is also not indented, meaning that you are not indenting the first line, which is normally what you would do in a paragraph. but you are not doing that for the abstract. After you centered abstract, hit enter and just start typing. That ensures that the alignment is on the left and not indented. So your abstract should look like this. You have abstract bolded here in the center, and then you just hit enter and you are right here on the left. There's no indentation, there's no indents. Now, this is a kind of just an example abstract that I've typed out. This is the abstract for my paper. High-fat diets have been shown to have negative effects on learning and memory in both animals and humans. Due to the prevalence of high-fat containing foods in today's society, it is important to study their effects on memory and brain markers. Notice those first two sentences are just giving kind of background information about the research topic and the research question. 100 male mice were given a control diet or a diet high in fat, and behavior was measured approximately 4 months after the diet manipulation began. Mice were tested through the open field test, elevated zero maze, and the Morris water maze. That second part is an abbreviation of the methods. Mice given the high-fat diet showed impairments in learning and memory, spending significantly less time in the target quadrant during probe trial compared to control mice. Mice given a high-fat diet also showed significantly higher levels of anxiety in the open field test. This is an abbreviated part of my results. Then my last sentence, these results highlight the effects of a high-fat diet on behavior and how diet can affect much more than just waistlines. So that's kind of a little bit of an abbreviated discussion / implication of the findings. So your abstract is a very, very succinct summary of your entire paper, okay? And it is not to be more than 250 words. After your abstract, you are now going to start writing your sections. So for the introduction section, which is going to start on page 3, you do not label it as introduction. At the very top of the page, you're going to put the title of your paper, and it's not bolded, it's not in parentheses or anything like that. You're just going to type out the title of your paper. Then you left, justify, and indent as you would do for all your paragraphs, and you just start writing. After the introduction section, you are going to find your methods and materials. Methods and materials should be labeled and centered and bolded. If you are going to have different sections, you don't have to, but if you are going to or want to. So for instance, a section on participants or measures or statistics, flush those to the left and bold them. One important thing to keep in mind is that your methods section must be in past tense. You are commenting on what has already been done, right? And so with your materials and methods section, that must be, again, it must be in the past tense. Feel free to add tables if you want to, just don't forget to reference it. So again, when you're talking about a certain number of males and females, a certain number of people in your experimental conditions, it might be useful to have a table, but just when you're writing in your paragraph, just say sample sizes for each of our condition, or if each of the conditions can be seen in table 1. Just make sure that it's referenced. After the methods, we have results. Results should be labeled, centered, and bolded. Remember the APA style rules regarding what needs to be italicized, how degrees of freedom should be reported. See the lab PowerPoint, again, from a few weeks back, specifically the one that I have uploaded also within the modules. Since you'll be providing a figure or more, and this is required for your assignment, you must give me a figure or 2. You should always refer to those in the paper. So for instance, if you're writing in your results section, there was a significant interaction between X and Y. Post hoc tests revealed that there was a significant difference between X1 and X2 at Y1, as seen in figure 1. Do not just give me a figure 1 with no context. Do not just give me an image with no reference to it whatsoever, right? Also keep in mind, as we discussed in the APA results PowerPoint, no interpretation of the results is in this section, okay? You're just reporting on what you found. The discussion section, on the other hand, which is labeled, centered, and bolded, is going to be where you start actually commenting on what you found. The last section is the references, labeled, centered, and bolded. Your references must be in alphabetical order. You must also have hanging indents in your APA references, meaning that your first line looks left justified, and then your second and third, etc. lines are going to be indented. So references should appear at the end of the paper, centered at the top of the page in bold. Again, that's the section header. All text should be double-spaced, just like the rest of the paper. Oops. So all text should be double-spaced like the rest of the paper. Your paper is an APA paper, meaning that it must be double-spaced. All lines after the first line for every entry in your reference section should be indented. That is called the hanging indent. Last names should appear first, with author's first and middle names written as initials. So Lippy, comma, SLP, comma, Rodriguez, M.R, etc. Okay. References should also be alphabetized by last name. Do not number your references. Okay. So what I'll leave you with is some general writing tips that I've come across over the years that as I read these kinds of papers over and over again from students, papers should be double-spaced. In Microsoft Word, you can go to paragraph, line spacing, and double. In Google, in Word, essentially, Google, I can't remember what it's called, Google Docs, there should be a section that allows you to do double spacing fairly well. Numbers that are less than 10. Numbers less than 10 should be spelled out. So if you're saying participants were given 2 days to complete this assignment, it is TWO, 2, okay? If you are reporting numbers, typically as they result in like a dependent variable, so like that's sometimes okay to use the numbers less than 10, but generally speaking, numbers less than 10 should be spelled out. Anything 10 or greater can be used as a number. Please, please, please indent your paragraphs. Paragraphs are meant to be indented. That is what allows for them to be able to serve as separate sections. There should be no first person in your writing. Do not use I. Do not use you. Do not use we. Now, we is special because we is sometimes okay in a collective sense. If it is done, it's used sparingly. So typically you can say, we found that blah, 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 but you don't want to keep using we. But under no circumstance should you ever say I in your science writing, okay? Another big pet peeve of mine, and another thing that you should never do, is do not use the word prove in your writing. This proved that. No, it did not. It is not really possible that a single project will prove anything. What your project does is it provides support for your hypotheses, but it doesn't prove it correct. Another thing is affect and effect. The effect of something, or to affect something. Affect is the verb. The effect is a noun, right? So the effect of diet, D-E-F-F-E-C-T, to affect something is going to be the verb. So those are just some general writing tips that should help you out as you're piecing together your discussion section, but also as you're piecing together your final paper.